Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to the English Globe, a place where we bring long, meaningful, and easy-to-understand conversations about world events so learners can improve listening, grow useful vocabulary, and gain confidence while we calmly explore today's important topic. The Saudi Crown Prince has landed in Washington, D.C., and this visit may lead to major conversations about politics, business, technology, and international partnerships that affect many people globally.
Today's topic is Saudi Crown Prince lands in Washington. What big deals are coming? And we will explain step by step why this visit attracts global attention, how it connects to energy markets, investment strategies, diplomatic ties, and emerging technologies, and why understanding these connections helps learners follow international news with greater clarity and confidence in plain, slow English.
We chose this subject because the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia shapes many areas of global life. From oil and renewable energy to large-scale investments, from technology partnerships to regional security cooperation, and learning these ideas in simple English will help you read newspapers and follow news broadcasts without feeling lost by complex vocabulary or fast speech.
The Crown Prince's visit is more than a symbolic trip. It often signals negotiations, memoranda of understanding, investment commitments, and policy dialogue that can lead to concrete projects in infrastructure, clean energy, artificial intelligence, tourism, and other sectors that governments and private companies discuss during high-level meetings in capitals like Washington.
For our listeners who study vocabulary, we will explain key terms such as bilateral relations, strategic partnership, memorandum of understanding, foreign direct investment, economic diversification, and technology transfer in clear examples, so you can both understand and use these phrases when talking about international news or business developments.
From a geopolitical perspective, it is important to note that when leaders meet, they also address regional stability, security cooperation, and crisis management. And while we will not enter political arguments, we will describe the possible topics and their practical meanings, so learners understand how diplomacy works in real-world terms and why it matters.
On the economic side, we will look at how Saudi investments can influence American businesses and how American technology and capital can support Saudi goals, particularly under Vision 2030, which aims to diversify the Saudi economy away from oil and toward industries like tourism, entertainment, renewable energy, and high technology.
Technology and innovation are likely to appear in conversations during the visit because both countries are interested in artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, satellite systems, and smart infrastructure. And we will explain how partnerships in these fields create jobs, build skills, and advance scientific cooperation across borders in ways learners can follow.
In this episode, we will also discuss energy topics in simple language, including how discussions about oil production, renewable energy projects, and energy security can affect global markets, the price of fuel, and investment flows, and we will show how these subjects connect to everyday life in different countries.
Throughout our discussion, I will help highlight listening strategies and comprehension tips so learners can follow long explanations more easily, such as noting transition words, identifying topic sentences, and practicing repeating new phrases aloud to improve pronunciation and memory in practical ways.
We will present short vocabulary blocks during the episode to reinforce words you hear in the conversation, and we will offer simple example sentences, useful synonyms, and small quizzes you can use to check your understanding and to practice speaking about diplomacy, business, and technology in English.
Please remember that we keep our approach neutral and educational. We explain facts, possible outcomes, and common interpretations reported by reliable sources, and we avoid unverified claims, partisan language, or content that violates platform guidelines so listeners can learn safely and confidently.
Before we move deeper into the episode, we kindly invite you to support the English Globe by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and turning on notifications, because your support allows us to create long, high-quality, beginner-friendly episodes that connect English practice with important global stories and real-world vocabulary.
We would love to hear from you in the comments, so please tell us where you are listening from and what questions you have about today's visit. Whether you want more explanation about diplomacy, business deals, or technology partnerships, because your feedback helps us design future lessons that meet your learning needs and language goals.
Now, let us begin our step-by-step exploration. First, we will explain who the Saudi Crown Prince is and what Vision 2030 means. Then, we will examine the history of U.S.-Saudi relations, and later, we will analyze likely economic and technological deals while teaching vocabulary and listening skills suitable for learners at every level. To understand why the Saudi Crown Prince's visit to Washington is receiving so much global attention, we first need to look at who he is, what responsibilities he holds, and how his decisions influence not only Saudi Arabia, but also many parts of the world, because the Crown Prince is not simply a political leader working inside his own country, but a driving force behind Saudi Arabia's modern transformation, shaping economic plans, directing major projects, building new industries, and representing the kingdom in international meetings where long-term cooperation, global development, and strategic partnerships are created through careful dialogue and high-level diplomacy.
The Crown Prince serves as the central figure behind Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030, which is a long-term national plan designed to diversify the economy, reduce dependence on oil, expand industries such as tourism, entertainment, renewable energy, and technology, and create more opportunities for young people. And because this vision includes partnerships with global companies, universities, and governments, his leadership style has become known worldwide for promoting modernization, encouraging new industries, and showing a strong interest in global cooperation that brings ideas, investment, and innovation into the kingdom.
Saudi Arabia is an extremely important country in the world for several reasons, and the first one many people think about is energy, because the kingdom plays a central role in the global oil market and influences the balance of supply and demand across Asia, Europe, and the Americas, which means that decisions made by Saudi leaders can affect fuel prices, transportation costs, and economic stability in many countries, making the Crown Prince a key figure in discussions about energy policy, long-term sustainability, and international economic planning.
Beyond energy, Saudi Arabia is becoming a major investment hub, attracting global companies in construction, technology, tourism, and manufacturing, especially as it builds new futuristic projects like NEOM, The Line, and other large-scale developments that require partnerships with engineers, researchers, and investors from the United States, Europe, and Asia, which is why business communities pay attention when the Crown Prince travels, because such visits often bring announcements of joint ventures, new contracts, or multi-billion-dollar investment opportunities.
The kingdom also plays an influential role in regional politics, especially in the Middle East, where cooperation on security, trade routes, and diplomatic stability affects neighboring countries and global partners, and this makes the Crown Prince an important figure in conversations about peace, conflict prevention, and regional development, which explains why his diplomatic trips often become major international news stories, followed by governments, analysts, businesses, and students of global politics.
Whenever the Crown Prince travels to a major capital like Washington, it usually signals that important discussions are taking place, because visits at this level rarely focus on a single topic. Instead, they include wide-ranging conversations about defense cooperation, clean energy projects, science and technology partnerships, educational exchanges, climate initiatives, and economic agreements, all of which require careful preparation and attract global attention from the media, investors, and political observers.
For English learners, this is a great opportunity to learn vocabulary related to diplomacy, such as bilateral relations, which means cooperation between two countries. Strategic dialogue, which refers to planned discussions about long-term goals. And economic diversification, which means creating new industries, so a country does not rely on one main source of income. And learning these terms helps you understand global news more easily.
You will also see words like foreign investment, which means money coming from companies or governments in other countries. Regional stability, which refers to peace and cooperation in a certain part of the world. And international partnership, meaning when two or more countries work together on shared goals, and knowing these phrases helps you read articles, watch documentaries, and follow conversations about world affairs with more confidence.
The Crown Prince's visits matter because they connect Saudi Arabia's internal goals with global opportunities, allowing the kingdom to strengthen international friendships, attract new technology, build new industries, and address challenges such as climate change, economic transition, and security cooperation. And each visit opens doors for agreements that help shape the future of trade, innovation, and global diplomacy.
By understanding who the Crown Prince is, how he leads Saudi Arabia's modernization, and why his travels are followed by governments and global organizations, you build a strong foundation for understanding the rest of this episode, because the next sections will explore how his visit to Washington could influence economic cooperation, technological development, strategic decisions, and long-term partnerships that benefit both countries and the wider international community.
To understand why the Crown Prince has chosen Washington, D.C. for this important visit, we must look at the long history of cooperation between the United States and Saudi Arabia, because these two countries have worked together for many decades in areas such as security, energy, business, and regional stability, creating a partnership that influences policies, markets, and diplomatic decisions across many parts of the world. And learning about this relationship in clear English helps listeners see how nations build connections that last for generations.
The US-Saudi partnership began many years ago when both countries realized they had complementary strengths. The United States had advanced industries, strong military capabilities, and powerful global influence, while Saudi Arabia had significant energy resources and a strategic location in the Middle East. And this combination created a foundation for cooperation that expanded over time into education, business, technology, and cultural exchange programs that continue today.
One of the most important areas of cooperation is security, because both nations share an interest in keeping trade routes open, preventing regional conflicts, and supporting stability in the Middle East. And while we are not discussing politics or taking sides, it is important for learners to understand that many international partnerships are built on shared goals related to peace, protection, and cooperation, which require constant communication between leaders.
Another major area is trade, because American companies work with Saudi organizations on projects related to construction, technology, transportation, healthcare, renewable energy, and manufacturing. And Saudi investments in the United States support industries such as finance, real estate, and infrastructure, showing how two countries can exchange money, skills, and resources in ways that benefit both sides economically.
Energy has historically been a key part of this relationship, especially because Saudi Arabia is one of the world's largest oil producers and the United States is one of the biggest consumers. And even as the world moves toward renewable energy, both nations continue to discuss long-term strategies related to stability in global energy markets, which affects fuel prices, trade flows, and planning for a sustainable future.
In recent years, cooperation has expanded into education, with many Saudi students studying at American universities, improving their English, learning about business, healthcare, engineering, and technology, and bringing this knowledge back home to support Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 goals, which focus on modernization, innovation, and economic diversification beyond oil.
One of the most exciting developments is cooperation in new technologies, because both countries are exploring partnerships in artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, clean energy, robotics, biotechnology, and advanced research programs, and when leaders meet in Washington, they often discuss how scientists, experts, and companies from both nations can work together on large projects that shape the future of global innovation.
For English learners, these ideas can sometimes feel complex, but simple examples make them easier to understand, such as imagining the United States providing advanced software or engineering knowledge, while Saudi Arabia invests in infrastructure or futuristic cities, creating a win-win situation where both sides contribute something valuable and both gain long-term benefits from the partnership.
Another example is student exchange programs, where Saudi students learn English and study science or business in American universities, while American professors and researchers participate in conferences, workshops, and collaborative projects in Saudi Arabia, leading to the exchange of ideas, knowledge, and cultural understanding that strengthens the overall relationship between the two nations.
By working together, the United States gains economic opportunities, strategic partnerships, and access to important regional conversations, while Saudi Arabia gains technology, education, investment, and support for large national projects, and this balanced exchange helps both countries achieve goals that would be more difficult to reach alone, especially in a world where global cooperation is increasingly important.
This is why Washington, D.C. is such a significant place for a diplomatic visit, because the city is home to government institutions, international organizations, research centers, and major decision-makers who shape the policies that guide cooperation between countries, making it the ideal location for discussing long-term strategies, planning future agreements, and strengthening the ties between the United States and Saudi Arabia. In this part of our podcast, dear listeners, we are going to explore the possible topics that may appear in the meetings during the Saudi Crown Prince's important visit to Washington, and even though we can only discuss information that is publicly available and safe for monetization, there is still a lot to talk about, because when two powerful partners meet, one being the United States and the other being Saudi Arabia, there are usually many strategic, economic, and diplomatic subjects that shape not just their relationship, but also the future direction of regional and global politics. And understanding these topics will also help you improve your English vocabulary related to diplomacy, negotiations, and international cooperation.
One of the biggest topics that is expected in such high-level meetings is economic cooperation, because both countries are major players in global markets, and they have long-standing trade relationships. But in recent years, they have also focused more on technology, investment, diversification of industries, and new forms of business partnership. So in this episode, we want to explain how these economic discussions usually work and what kinds of English words you may hear when people talk about them in international news.
For example, you might hear words like bilateral trade, investment agreements, economic diversification, joint ventures, and strategic cooperation. And all of these terms refer to ways in which two countries try to increase opportunities, share resources, or develop long-term business projects that benefit both sides. And when you understand these phrases, you will feel more comfortable listening to world news in English, especially when the story is about government or business leaders meeting to negotiate new deals.
Another major topic that often appears in meetings between Washington and Riyadh is defense and security cooperation, because for many decades the United States and Saudi Arabia have shared security interests in the region, and they frequently discuss things like counterterrorism, military training, defense technology, and regional stability. And even though we cannot talk about secret or sensitive details, we can discuss common diplomatic language that appears in public statements, such as security partnership, regional threats, strategic defense systems, joint security initiatives, and military cooperation frameworks, all of which are useful vocabulary terms for English learners who want to understand global political news more clearly.
And when we talk about defense and security, we are not only referring to military topics, because modern security includes issues like cybersecurity, strategic communication, intelligence sharing, and diplomatic coordination, and countries often try to create peaceful strategies to reduce tension and avoid conflict. So another phrase that is very important is de-escalation, which means reducing conflict or lowering tensions between countries or groups. And this is a word that appears in many news articles whenever world leaders hold meetings to discuss peace or stability.
Clean energy and technological development are also expected to be major subjects of discussion during such a high-level visit, because the world is moving toward new energy solutions like solar power, wind power, hydrogen technology, and carbon-neutral projects. And both the United States and Saudi Arabia are investing heavily in cleaner technologies, which means they have many opportunities to collaborate, share research, and build new industries that support global sustainability. And important vocabulary in this area includes words like renewable energy, innovation, sustainability goals, climate partnerships, and technology transfer, all of which help learners understand how countries negotiate modern energy strategies.
When we talk about clean energy cooperation, one useful phrase to learn is energy transition, which refers to the slow and planned process of moving from traditional energy sources, such as oil and gas, to cleaner and more environmentally friendly sources. And since many governments around the world are now focusing on energy transition policies, it is a phrase you will hear very often in English language media, so it is important to understand it clearly.
Business investments will also be an important part of the meetings, because both countries want to attract international companies, create jobs, and develop new industries. And this means leaders often talk about opportunities for private companies, partnerships between investment funds, and cooperation in sectors like tourism, health, technology, and artificial intelligence. And in English, you might hear expressions like foreign investment, private sector collaboration, public-private partnerships, economic transformation projects, and high-value sectors, which all refer to ways in which companies and governments work together to grow the economy.
One phrase that is extremely common in business and diplomatic discussions is mutual benefits, which means that both sides gain something positive from the partnership, and world leaders often use this expression when they want to show that a deal is fair, balanced, and helpful for everyone involved. So when you hear this phrase in a news report or a press conference, you can understand that it means both countries believe the cooperation will help them achieve their goals.
Regional stability is another important topic, because Saudi Arabia and the United States both have strong interests in keeping peace and preventing conflict in the Middle East. And even though the details of geopolitical discussions are usually complex, public statements often talk about diplomatic solutions, regional dialogue, peace initiatives, shared security concerns, and stability efforts. And understanding these words will help you follow international news more easily, especially when the story involves negotiations or peace talks.
Another diplomatic word that English learners should know is mediation, which means when a neutral party helps two sides communicate or negotiate in order to solve a disagreement peacefully. And mediation is very common in international diplomacy, because many conflicts require a third party to help find common ground, and this is why you might hear the phrase mediated talks or mediation efforts in news reports about international meetings.
When high-level leaders meet, they also often discuss future cooperation and long-term strategic planning. And you might hear words like framework, roadmap, agreement, proposal, dialogue mechanism, and negotiation process. And these terms are used to describe the structure or plan that both sides create in order to continue working together. So learning these words will help you understand official statements that come from diplomatic meetings.
To help our listeners remember these vocabulary words more easily, we can summarize a few key terms that will be useful for understanding the topics expected in this visit. and these include economic cooperation, bilateral trade, joint ventures, defense partnership, regional stability, renewable energy, investment agreements, mediation, de-escalation, and strategic dialogue. And if you practice these words slowly and repeat them several times, you will become more confident when listening to English news.
So, dear listeners, as we explore these topics, economic cooperation, security discussions, clean energy development, business investment, and regional stability, we hope you not only understand the possible agenda of the meetings, but also improve your English vocabulary, because the more you learn these words, the easier it becomes to follow political and diplomatic stories in English. And we will continue to guide you through each part of this episode in a clear and friendly way.
In this section of our podcast, dear listeners, we are going to explore one of the most important parts of the Saudi Crown Prince's visit to Washington, which is the economic angle. Because in today's world, economic cooperation, trade agreements, and long-term investments play a major role in shaping relationships between countries. And when we talk about Saudi Arabia and the United States, their partnership has expanded far beyond oil, now reaching into technology, tourism, clean energy, artificial intelligence, and many other advanced sectors that connect the future of both nations in meaningful ways.
One of the biggest topics in this area is Saudi Arabia's ambitious Vision 2030 plan, which is a national program designed to transform the Saudi economy from one that depends mainly on oil to one that is diverse, modern, and full of new industries. And this plan includes ideas such as building new cities, developing high-tech industries, improving education, expanding tourism, and creating millions of new jobs. And the reason it is so important is because it shows the world that Saudi Arabia is preparing for a future where innovation, investment, and international partnerships are essential for long-term growth.
Vision 2030 matters for global partnerships because no country can transform its economy alone, and Saudi Arabia is actively working with countries around the world, including the United States, to bring in expertise, technology, investment, and training. And this cooperation creates opportunities not only for governments, but also for private companies, business leaders, engineers, researchers, and young professionals. And this is why understanding economic vocabulary in English becomes important for learners who want to follow global news and international business stories.
When we talk about Vision 2030, there are several key terms that English learners should remember, such as economic diversification, which means a country is trying to develop many different industries instead of depending on just one major source of income. Investment climate, which means how attractive and safe a country is for investors. And infrastructure development, which refers to building things like roads, airports, digital networks, and modern cities that support long-term growth. And these terms often appear in news articles, interviews, and economic reports.
Another important part of this topic is the growing interest of the United States in Saudi investments, because American companies, universities, and technology firms have many opportunities to work with Saudi partners on new projects, and at the same time, the United States benefits from Saudi financial investment in areas like clean energy, real estate, manufacturing, research, and advanced technology. And when both sides invest in each other, it strengthens their relationship and helps them stay competitive in a rapidly changing global economy.
In public discussions, officials sometimes use the phrase mutual economic benefit, which means both countries gain something positive from their partnership. And this phrase is important because it shows that economic cooperation is not one-sided, and that both the US and Saudi Arabia expect to support each other in achieving their goals, whether it is developing new technologies, building modern infrastructure, or creating more economic opportunities for their people.
Another major angle we must explore is how technology is rising extremely fast in Saudi Arabia, because Vision 2030 includes huge investments in digital transformation, which is a term that describes the process of using technology to improve services, industries, and daily life. And Saudi Arabia has launched tech hubs, digital training programs, artificial intelligence initiatives, and partnerships with global tech companies. And these efforts are designed to prepare the country for a future where knowledge, innovation, and high-skill jobs will be essential for national success.
Tourism is also an important part of Vision 2030 because Saudi Arabia is opening its doors to international visitors in a way it never did before, and the government is investing heavily in building new resorts, cultural centres, museums, entertainment zones, cruise ports, and natural attractions. And this expansion brings opportunities for global travel companies, airlines, and hospitality brands. And for English learners, this means you may encounter vocabulary like tourism development, cultural attractions, heritage sites, visitor experience, and international hospitality sector.
Energy diversification is another big topic, because even though Saudi Arabia is one of the world's largest oil producers, it is now investing in new forms of energy, especially solar power, hydrogen production, wind farms, and other green initiatives. And the phrase energy diversification simply means the country is developing many types of energy sources instead of depending on only one. And this is important for the future, because clean energy is becoming a major priority for countries all around the world, including the United States.
One of the most exciting areas of cooperation between the two countries is artificial intelligence, often called AI, because both the US and Saudi Arabia are investing heavily in AI research, data centers, smart cities, robotics, and digital services. And AI is becoming one of the most important tools for improving transportation, healthcare, education, business, and government services. So it makes sense that both countries want to collaborate, share expertise, and create partnerships that help them lead in the global technology market.
When we talk about AI and technology in simple English, there are useful vocabulary words such as innovation, automation, digital infrastructure, data analysis, and smart systems, which all describe ways technology is used to solve problems and make life easier. And these terms will appear more and more often in global news, so learning them now will help our listeners understand future business and technology stories.
Green projects are another essential pillar of Vision 2030 because the government is working to improve the environment, reduce carbon emissions, plant more trees, protect natural areas, and develop eco-friendly industries. And these efforts require international cooperation, scientific research, and large investments from global partners, including American companies, and English learners may come across vocabulary like sustainability, carbon neutrality, renewable resources, environmental strategy, and green innovation.
At the same time, the United States also benefits from these partnerships because American companies gain access to new markets, new contracts, new investment opportunities, and large projects that can support U.S. workers and industries. And this is why news reports often mention terms such as strategic partnerships, joint ventures, economic cooperation frameworks, and cross-border investments, which describe how businesses from different countries work together to achieve shared goals.
To make this easier for English learners, we can highlight a few simple vocabulary terms that appear often in discussions about trade and investment, such as market, which means a place where goods or services are bought and sold. Trade, which means buying and selling goods between countries. Investment, which means putting money into a project in order to gain future profit. Exports, which are goods a country sells to other countries. And imports, which are goods a country buys from abroad.
When world leaders discuss economic topics, they often talk about long-term cooperation, which means working together not just for one project or 1 year, but for many years in the future. And this phrase is very important because Vision 2030 is not a short-term plan. It is a long-term transformation that requires strong partnerships, trusted allies, and steady cooperation with global players like the United States.
So, dear listeners, by understanding Vision 2030, the rise of technology, the growth of tourism, the push for energy diversification, the expansion of AI, the importance of green projects, and the economic benefits for both the US and Saudi Arabia, you are not only learning about global politics, but also building strong English vocabulary that will help you follow international news with more confidence and clarity.
In this part of our episode, dear listeners, we are going to explore how technology and innovation might play a major role in the Crown Prince's visit to Washington, because both the United States and Saudi Arabia are investing heavily in new industries such as artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, renewable energy, digital infrastructure, biotechnology, and even space research. And these areas are becoming central to modern partnerships, since countries around the world want to prepare their economies for a future where knowledge, advanced skills, and cutting-edge digital systems will shape progress and long-term national development.
One important idea to understand is that Saudi Arabia is working very quickly to grow its technology ecosystem, which refers to all the companies, researchers, engineers, universities, and digital services that support tech development in a country. And under Vision 2030, the government has launched major digital programs, innovation hubs, AI research centers, and partnership opportunities with global leaders. And because the United States is home to some of the world's most advanced technology firms, both countries see a strong possibility for collaboration that can help them build stronger digital futures.
The United States also benefits from cooperating with partners who are ready to invest in new industries, because American companies that specialize in artificial intelligence, cloud computing, cybersecurity protection, and advanced data technologies are constantly searching for new markets and new long-term partnerships, and Saudi Arabia offers exactly that through its rapidly growing digital sector, large development projects, and national strategies that focus on technological advancement, innovation, and economic modernization.
When leaders from both countries meet, one possible discussion topic is artificial intelligence, often called AI, which describes computer systems that can learn, make decisions, and help solve complex problems. And Saudi Arabia has already launched many AI initiatives to support smart cities, digital government services, health research, transportation systems, and modern education tools. So, working with American universities, technology companies, and AI researchers could help both sides strengthen their knowledge and create solutions that are useful in many different industries.
Another area that often appears in international conversations is cybersecurity, which refers to the protection of important systems, networks, and data from digital threats. And in today's world, where so much information moves across the internet every second, countries must work together to share expertise, improve security tools, and develop strong digital defenses. And Saudi Arabia and the United States both recognize the importance of safe and reliable digital environments, which is why cybersecurity cooperation is becoming a major topic in global discussions.
We also need to look at renewable energy technologies, because Saudi Arabia is working to reduce its dependence on oil and increase its use of clean energy sources such as solar power, wind energy, hydrogen production, and eco-friendly technologies, and American companies have strong experience in developing renewable energy systems, designing efficient solar panels, building smart grids, and creating sustainable technologies. So there is great potential for both countries to collaborate in ways that benefit their long-term economic and environmental goals.
A very exciting future field is space research, because Saudi Arabia has recently expanded its interest in satellite technology, space exploration, and scientific missions, and the United States, through its space agencies and private space companies, remains one of the global leaders in space innovation. And this creates opportunities for cooperation in areas such as satellite communication, scientific research, and future space missions, where both sides can share knowledge, invest in development, and open new paths for educational and technological growth.
For English learners, this is a good moment to focus on some simple vocabulary words that appear in discussions about technology, such as innovation, which means creating new ideas, tools, or systems that improve how we live. Digital transformation, which describes the process of using technology to modernize services. Research, which means studying something carefully to discover new information. Infrastructure, which refers to the basic systems a country needs, like internet networks or energy grids. And collaboration, which means working together to achieve a shared goal.
Another helpful term is tech ecosystem, which is a phrase used to describe the network of companies, startups, experts, investors, and institutions that support technological growth in a country. And when reporters say a country wants to expand its tech ecosystem, they usually mean that the government is building new research centers, training programs, digital services, and innovation hubs where people can create new ideas and develop advanced technologies.
We should also highlight the term future industries, which refers to sectors that will become more important for the global economy in the coming years, including AI, robotics, biotechnology, renewable energy, advanced manufacturing, digital finance, and space technology. And when world leaders talk about these industries, they are thinking about long-term national development and how countries can stay competitive in a world where technology changes very quickly and new skills are always needed.
Saudi Arabia and the United States share similar goals in this area because both want to build strong digital economies that support their young populations, create new job opportunities, develop world-class research centers, and attract international talent. And their cooperation has the potential to shape important global projects, especially as AI, cybersecurity, clean energy, and space technology continue to grow and influence how societies operate, communicate, and advance.
For English learners, understanding news about technology is becoming more and more important because global events increasingly involve digital systems, online platforms, automated tools, and advanced technologies that shape everything from healthcare and education to transportation and business. So learning vocabulary related to innovation helps you follow these stories with confidence and understand how countries develop strategies to stay ahead in fast-growing industries.
So when we look at the Crown Prince's visit, it is clear that technology and innovation may become major parts of the discussions, not because of political debates, but because these fields represent opportunities for cooperation, investment, and long-term development that benefit both sides. And this type of collaboration shows how modern partnerships focus not only on traditional topics like energy or trade, but also on the industries that will shape the future of the global economy. When world leaders meet, especially during important diplomatic visits like this one, they often take time to discuss regional and global issues that affect not only their own countries, but also many other nations around the world. And these conversations usually focus on topics such as peace, cooperation, and long-term stability. Because international relationships work best when countries understand each other's concerns, share useful information, and look for ways to reduce tensions and encourage dialogue. And explaining these ideas in simple English helps learners understand how global communication supports harmony and responsible decision-making on the international stage.
One important idea in international relations is regional stability, which means keeping a certain area of the world calm, safe, and peaceful so that people can live normal lives, businesses can grow, and countries can communicate without conflict. And when leaders sit together in meetings, they often talk about how to support stability by building partnerships, encouraging cooperation, and reducing misunderstandings that can create unnecessary challenges or uncertainty for governments, organizations, and ordinary people who depend on a peaceful environment to work, travel, and plan their futures.
Another key aspect of these conversations involves diplomatic cooperation, which refers to countries working together through meetings, agreements, communication channels, and shared projects that build trust and understanding. And this cooperation does not mean that countries always think the same way, but rather that they choose respectful communication and peaceful negotiation as the best tools for solving problems, exchanging knowledge, and addressing issues that affect multiple nations at the same time. And this is an important lesson for English learners who want to understand how diplomacy works in real life.
Many global challenges require collective action because no single country can solve them alone, and examples include safe trade routes, public health preparation, environmental protection, cybersecurity, transportation flows, and humanitarian support during emergencies. And when leaders discuss these challenges, they focus on finding balanced solutions that allow countries to share information, coordinate efforts, and build stronger systems that protect people and support development in different parts of the world, showing how cooperation is central to successful global management.
When discussing security, leaders often highlight ideas that help protect communities, ensure safe travel, prevent risks, and support international communication. And these discussions are typically focused on broad topics such as cooperation between agencies, information sharing, educational programs, regional partnerships, and preventive strategies that reduce misunderstandings and encourage peaceful outcomes, all of which help create a safer and more predictable environment for countries that rely on open communication and supportive relationships to manage shared responsibilities.
A very important term for learners to understand is dialogue, which simply means talking in a respectful, constructive way that helps people or countries understand one another. And diplomatic dialogue is one of the most powerful tools for solving disagreements, building trust, and reducing confusion, because it gives leaders the chance to explain their viewpoints clearly, listen to others, and work towards solutions that consider the needs and concerns of everyone involved, making dialogue a core part of effective global cooperation.
Another helpful word is cooperation, which describes situations where groups or nations work together toward a shared goal. And in global politics, cooperation can appear in many different forms, such as joint research programs, education exchanges, cultural initiatives, technology partnerships, or discussions that help countries coordinate plans that guide long-term development. And when leaders prioritize cooperation, they create an environment where progress becomes easier and relationships grow stronger over time.
When leaders talk about peace, they are not only discussing the absence of conflict, but also the presence of communication, respect, and structured plans that help countries avoid misunderstandings, because peace is built through careful planning, open discussion, and continuous efforts to understand perspectives from different sides. And large diplomatic visits often provide the stage for such conversations, since they bring together individuals who have the authority to make decisions, propose ideas, and encourage collaborative solutions that benefit many people.
These discussions also include global challenges, a phrase that refers to issues affecting many parts of the world, such as climate change adaptation, food security, water management, and technological development. And when countries coordinate their strategies, they can share expert knowledge, support scientific research, and create international standards that make problem-solving faster and more effective, allowing nations with different strengths to combine their efforts in ways that improve conditions at both regional and global levels.
For English learners, understanding these concepts is extremely valuable because words like stability, peaceful cooperation, regional dialogue, and international partnership appear often in news articles, documentaries, and global discussions. And becoming familiar with these terms makes it easier to follow long explanations about world affairs, understand speeches from leaders, and read reports from international organizations that frequently focus on cooperation strategies designed to support global well-being.
When leaders meet in Washington, D.C., a city filled with institutions, embassies, research centers, and diplomatic offices, they have the opportunity to exchange thoughtful perspectives on these regional and global issues. And while each country has its own national priorities, These meetings help create a more predictable and cooperative international environment where communication is open, information is shared carefully, and common goals are discussed in a calm, professional, and productive manner that strengthens long-term relationships.
So as we consider the Crown Prince's visit, it becomes clear that conversations about regional stability and global cooperation are likely to play an important role, not because of political debates, but because countries today must constantly work together to manage shared responsibilities, create peaceful communication channels, and prepare for future challenges that require thoughtful planning, respectful dialogue, and strong international partnerships built on understanding, education, and cooperation.
Dear listeners, in this part of our podcast, we are going to explore what the Crown Prince's visit to Washington might mean, not only for Saudi Arabia and the United States, but also for the world. Because when leaders from major countries meet, their conversations often influence many aspects of global life, including energy markets, international business confidence, regional political stability, and long-term cooperation on a wide range of issues, and understanding these effects in simple English can help learners follow global news more effectively and build confidence in their comprehension of complex international events.
One of the first areas that can be influenced by such diplomatic meetings is the energy market, because Saudi Arabia is a leading oil producer and the United States is a major energy consumer. And discussions about oil production, renewable energy, or investment in energy infrastructure can create signals for investors, companies, and governments worldwide, influencing energy prices, trade flows, and planning for industries that rely on oil, gas, or clean energy solutions, and understanding phrases like energy partnership, market stability, and renewable energy projects is very useful for English learners who want to follow international news.
Another important effect of high-level visits is on business confidence, because when investors see that two powerful countries are communicating, negotiating agreements, and planning for cooperation, they feel more confident to invest in projects, open new companies, or expand existing operations, and this confidence can positively affect stock markets, private investments, technology development, and joint ventures. And by following simple explanations, learners can understand how diplomacy, economics, and planning are closely connected in the global business environment.
Political stability is also influenced by diplomatic discussions, because leaders often use meetings to explain priorities, reduce misunderstandings, clarify intentions, and create frameworks for ongoing cooperation. And even though these conversations may seem distant from daily life, they help create a safer and more predictable environment for governments, companies, and individuals. And this is why phrases like strategic partnership, bilateral agreement, and long-term cooperation appear frequently in news reports about international meetings.
To illustrate this with a simple example, imagine two countries agreeing to work together on renewable energy projects. When they sign agreements, companies know they can plan investments, engineers can develop new technology, and communities can expect cleaner energy solutions in the future. And this demonstrates how diplomatic cooperation, even if it seems abstract, has real effects on business, technology, and daily life around the world. And understanding these connections helps English learners see the practical side of diplomacy and international relations.
Another concept that is important to understand is partnership, which refers to two or more countries, organizations, or companies working together toward shared goals. And partnerships can cover areas like energy, technology, trade, education, security, or cultural exchange. And by learning how this word is used in diplomatic contexts, learners can better understand news headlines, press releases, and official statements that highlight agreements between nations.
Closely related to partnership is negotiation, which is the process where two or more sides discuss terms, find compromises, and agree on solutions that are acceptable for everyone involved, and negotiations can take hours, days, or even months, depending on the complexity of the issues, and learning this word helps English learners understand that diplomacy often involves careful dialogue, planning, and problem-solving, rather than immediate decisions or unilateral actions.
Agreement is another key word that appears frequently in international news because it refers to the outcome of successful negotiations, whether it is a trade deal, investment plan, energy cooperation project, or security framework. And when countries announce agreements, they are signaling to the world that they have reached a mutual understanding, which builds confidence, trust, and predictability for global markets, businesses, and international organizations. And hearing this term in context helps learners connect English vocabulary to real-world events.
Finally, cooperation is a word that summarizes many aspects of diplomacy, because it describes situations where countries work together, share knowledge, combine resources, and plan jointly to achieve common goals. And cooperation is central to all discussions between nations, whether the focus is economic, technological, educational, environmental, or security-related. And understanding this concept in simple English helps learners recognize why international meetings are so important for global stability and progress.
To give a practical example, consider a scenario where the United States and Saudi Arabia agree to cooperate on artificial intelligence projects and renewable energy initiatives. Companies, universities, and governments around the world will notice. Investors may adjust their strategies, engineers will have opportunities to develop new technology, and communities may benefit from cleaner energy and new job opportunities. And this simple illustration shows how diplomatic agreements, partnerships, and cooperation have effects that extend far beyond the meeting room into real global outcomes.
In summary, dear listeners, the Crown Prince's visit to Washington has the potential to influence energy markets, create business confidence, support political stability, and encourage long-term cooperation across many areas. And by understanding concepts such as partnership, negotiation, agreement, and cooperation, learners can follow international news with greater clarity, recognize the real-world consequences of diplomatic meetings, and build useful vocabulary that strengthens their ability to discuss complex global topics in English.
So as we continue to explore this episode, it becomes clear that while these visits may seem formal or distant at first, they have a very real impact on the world economy, technology, energy planning, and international relationships. And by learning English through these discussions, listeners are not only improving their language skills, but also gaining valuable insight into how nations work together to address challenges, create opportunities, and plan for a more cooperative and stable global future.
In this part of our episode, we are going to focus on something very practical and useful for English learners, which is how you can use global news to improve your English skills. Because reading, listening to, and following international news not only keeps you informed about world events, but also exposes you to a wide range of vocabulary, sentence structures, and ideas that are important for developing confidence in reading and understanding English. And by paying attention to clear examples, repeated phrases, and professional news reporting, learners can gradually become more comfortable with complex language in a way that feels natural and engaging.
One of the first skills to develop when reading international news is understanding political vocabulary, because global stories often include words such as diplomacy, negotiation, partnership, agreement, cooperation, stability, and policy. And learning these words in context allows learners to grasp their meaning more effectively, because seeing a word in a real sentence, rather than memorizing it from a list, helps you understand how it is used, how it connects to other words, and how it conveys important ideas about countries, leaders, and international events, which are key elements in global reporting.
Another important skill is understanding complex sentences, which are very common in global news articles, press releases, and international reports, because professional writing often combines multiple ideas in one sentence using connecting words such as because, while, Although, however, and therefore, and by practicing breaking these sentences into smaller, understandable parts, learners can gradually improve their reading comprehension and also develop the ability to follow longer spoken explanations in podcasts, documentaries, or interviews, which are all excellent ways to strengthen listening skills.
English learners should also focus on important phrases that appear repeatedly in global news, such as long-term cooperation, mutual understanding, strategic partnership, economic diversification, regional stability, and international collaboration. Because these phrases are not only common in political discussions, but also provide a structure that helps learners predict meaning, understand context, and recognize connections between ideas, which makes reading and listening much easier. And when you become familiar with these phrases, your ability to follow news about diplomacy, economics, and global events will improve significantly.
A practical technique for improving listening comprehension is to listen to the news slowly, pause frequently, and try to identify the main ideas and keywords in each sentence, because this method allows you to focus on understanding meaning rather than worrying about every single word. And as you become more confident, you can gradually listen to longer segments without pausing, which trains your brain to follow natural spoken English. And by combining listening with reading written news articles, you strengthen your ability to connect pronunciation, spelling, and meaning, which is an essential skill for fluency.
Another helpful method is repetition and note-taking. Because listening to the same news story several times allows you to notice vocabulary, sentence patterns, and ways of connecting ideas that you may not recognize on the first try. And taking simple notes while listening or reading helps you remember key points, phrases, and words. And even writing short summaries in your own words reinforces your understanding and improves both writing and comprehension skills, making news a practical tool for overall English learning.
It is also useful to compare sources when reading international news, because different news outlets may explain the same story using slightly different words or sentence structures. And by reading multiple versions of the same event, you can learn alternative vocabulary, synonyms, and ways to express ideas in English, which increases your flexibility with the language. And by observing how professional reporters use formal but clear language, you gain examples of how to write and speak about global topics accurately and politely.
Understanding the context of global events is another key strategy, because news is not just about individual events, but also about the connections between countries, history, culture, and economics. And by learning to see the bigger picture, English learners can understand why leaders make certain decisions, why agreements are important, and how international relations influence business, technology, and daily life around the world. And practicing this type of reading and listening develops critical thinking while improving language comprehension at the same time.
Listening and reading about international news also introduces learners to formal expressions, such as, "It is expected that," according to officials, experts suggest, and "this initiative aims to," which are very common in professional reporting, and understanding these phrases helps learners recognize how information is presented in a neutral and factual way, which is essential for following educational, business, and global content. And once learners become comfortable with these expressions, they can better interpret statements, reports, and discussions in English.
Finally, dear listeners, the key to using global news as a learning tool is to remain calm, patient, and consistent, because learning English through real-world stories is a long process that requires attention to detail, repeated practice, and curiosity. And by combining reading, listening, note-taking, and vocabulary exercises with stories about diplomacy, economics, technology, and regional developments, learners can gradually build confidence, improve comprehension, expand vocabulary, and enjoy the process of connecting language learning with the fascinating world of international affairs, making English learning both meaningful and engaging.
So in conclusion, listening to and reading global news helps learners practice vocabulary, follow complex sentences, understand repeated phrases, and develop listening and comprehension skills. And when you approach this learning calmly and consistently, it becomes an enjoyable experience that not only improves your English, but also gives you insight into the world, helping you feel more confident, informed, and prepared to participate in discussions about international events, partnerships, and cooperation across countries.
Remember, dear listeners, every time you read a news article, watch a short international news video, or listen to a podcast like this one, you are practicing essential English skills in a real-world context. And over time, this steady practice will help you understand longer explanations, follow professional conversations, recognize important vocabulary, and feel more confident about engaging with global news, which makes your English learning journey both practical and deeply connected to the world around you.
As we reach the final part of today's episode, let us take a careful look at what we have discussed, because reviewing key points helps consolidate understanding and strengthens both vocabulary and comprehension skills, which is especially useful for English learners. Today, we explored the recent visit of the Saudi Crown Prince to Washington, D.C., and examined why this visit is important not only for Saudi Arabia and the United States, but also for the wider world. We started by introducing the Crown Prince, explaining his leadership role, economic vision, and global influence, and we discussed how Saudi Arabia's strategic position in energy, trade, and technology makes every visit highly significant for international audiences.
We also focused on the United States-Saudi relationship, highlighting long-standing cooperation in areas such as security, energy, trade, education, and technology. By understanding these partnerships, listeners learned how strong international relations can benefit both countries and even have a broader influence on the global economy, regional stability, and long-term development. We explained these topics in clear, simple English, emphasizing vocabulary such as partnership, cooperation, agreement, and negotiation, which appear frequently in international news, and practicing these words in context helps learners follow similar stories more easily in newspapers, podcasts, and other media.
In addition, we explored the possible subjects of the meetings, including economic cooperation, defense and security discussions, clean energy and technological development, and investment opportunities. We highlighted how Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030, with its focus on diversification, AI, renewable energy, and tourism, connects to global partnerships and why the United States could benefit from these collaborations. We also examined how technology and innovation are central to these discussions, from artificial intelligence and cybersecurity to space research and renewable energy projects. And understanding these ideas helps learners recognize how modern diplomacy often integrates science, business, and strategic planning.
Another essential part of the episode was the focus on regional and global issues, where we explained why conversations about peace, stability, and diplomatic cooperation are so important. By presenting these concepts calmly and in simple language, we helped listeners understand that international relations involve dialogue, mutual understanding, and long-term planning, rather than arguments or conflict. And this perspective allows learners to grasp the significance of global news without feeling overwhelmed by complex political debates. Key vocabulary like stability, dialogue, cooperation, and global challenges was emphasized, helping students identify patterns and repeated phrases in professional reporting.
We also discussed the broader impact of diplomatic visits on the world, showing how agreements, partnerships, and negotiations can influence energy markets, business confidence, political stability, and international collaboration. Using clear examples and simple language, we illustrated how even formal discussions can have practical effects on everyday life, such as shaping investment opportunities, encouraging technological growth, and supporting regional stability. This understanding is essential for learners who want to connect language practice with real-world applications, and it demonstrates how English learning can go hand in hand with understanding global events.
In the penultimate section, we focused on practical advice for English learners, highlighting how reading, listening to, and analysing international news can improve vocabulary, comprehension, and listening skills. Techniques such as breaking down complex sentences, identifying key phrases, repeating and summarising information, and comparing sources were explained, all with the goal of helping learners become more confident in following global events. By connecting language learning to current topics, students can improve their skills while simultaneously understanding the world around them, making the learning process both meaningful and engaging.
Now, as we conclude this episode, we want to encourage every listener to continue practicing listening and reading skills through global news topics, because exposure to real-world stories in English not only strengthens vocabulary, but also teaches critical thinking, comprehension, and confidence when following international discussions. The more you practice, the easier it becomes to understand long sentences, complex ideas, and professional vocabulary, and gradually you will feel more comfortable participating in discussions, writing summaries, or explaining events in your own words.
Dear listeners, we hope that this episode has provided you with both valuable English practice and a clear understanding of the significance of the Crown Prince's visit to Washington. Remember that learning English is a gradual process, and combining it with interesting global topics helps you build knowledge, context, and practical language skills. By consistently engaging with news, podcasts, and professional explanations, you can enhance your listening ability, expand vocabulary, and strengthen comprehension in a natural and enjoyable way.
We sincerely thank you for joining us today and spending this time with the English Globe. Your attention and dedication to learning English through meaningful global topics inspire us to continue creating detailed, educational, and beginner-friendly episodes. Every minute you spend listening, following explanations, and practicing new words brings you closer to fluency and a deeper understanding of the world.
Thank you very much for being part of this journey with us. We truly appreciate your support, your curiosity, and your commitment to learning. Keep exploring global news, keep practicing English patiently, and remember that every effort you make helps you improve. We look forward to bringing you more informative and educational content that is calm, clear, and designed to help learners like you feel confident and inspired.
Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and continue exploring the fascinating world of international events while improving your English. Your journey is valuable, and every step you take builds knowledge, language skills, and global understanding. Thank you again for your time and attention, and we wish you continued success in learning English and following the world around you.